In 1992, construction workers in San Diego stumbled upon something that would unleash one of the fiercest scientific battles in modern archaeology. What they uncovered wasn't a skeleton, wasn't a civilization, wasn't even recognizably human. It was broken bones, ancient, shattered mastodon bones scattered across a highway construction site. But here's the thing, those bones told a story that would rewrite 15,000 years of human history. A story that scientists are still fighting about to this day. Picture this, late autumn of 1992. Southern California is booming. The population is exploding. Cities are spreading outward in every direction. The infrastructure can't keep up, so they're expanding highways, widening roads, digging deeper into the earth to make room for progress. It's routine work. Bulldozers, backhoes, construction crews moving tons of dirt and stone every single day. Nobody expects to find anything remarkable. They're just trying to widen State Route 54, a major freeway that runs south of San Diego, cutting through the landscape between the city and the border region. It's just another construction project in another growing American city. Then the machines struck bone. At first, nothing seemed extraordinary. The construction crew saw scattered fragments, broken stone, the kind of material easily overlooked during a major construction project. These things happen all the time. Animal bones from various geological periods turn up during construction work. Usually they're cataloged, photographed, filed away, and forgotten. This time was different, because one person made a crucial decision. Someone on that site recognized that this discovery might be significant. They made the call to stop the excavation and bring in the professionals. They called in archaeologists. That person was Richard Cerruti, a paleontologist working on behalf of the San Diego Natural History Museum. Cerruti had been hired by the museum to monitor the construction site for paleontological discoveries, exactly the kind of work that typically yields nothing of great importance. But Cerruti had a sharp eye. He understood bones. He understood geological context. And when he examined what the construction crew had unearthed, he recognized something remarkable. This wasn't just any pile of ancient bones. This was something that demanded serious investigation. Over the months that followed, what emerged from the ground would ignite one of the fiercest debates in modern archaeology. A battle of ideas that would pit established orthodoxy against revolutionary new evidence. A clash between the cautious skepticism of mainstream science and the bold claims of researchers willing to challenge everything we thought we knew. The excavation revealed mastodon bones, lots of them. The team found tusks, molars, vertebrae, ribs, and more than 300 bone fragments. These weren't randomly scattered. They were concentrated in a specific area, arranged in patterns that suggested intentionality. The bones weren't just old, they were incredibly old. When scientists eventually dated them using uranium series dating techniques, the results appeared almost impossible to accept. These mastodon remains were approximately 130,000 years old. Let that number sink in for a moment. 130,000 years. That's roughly 7 times older than the currently accepted dates for human arrival in North America. To understand why this discovery matters so profoundly, you need to understand what the scientific consensus has been. For decades, perhaps over a century, archaeologists have maintained that humans first arrived in North America approximately 14,000 to 15,000 years ago. Some researchers have pushed this date back to perhaps 20,000 years, citing controversial sites with contested evidence. A few fringe theories suggest humans might have arrived 25,000 or even 30,000 years ago. But 130,000 years? That was simply beyond the pale. That contradicted everything we thought we understood about human migration patterns, about the capabilities of early humans, about the very timeline of human evolution and dispersal across the globe. The reason this established timeline seemed so solid was because of the geography. To get to North America from Asia, where humans were living during the Pleistocene epoch, required either an incredibly dangerous ocean crossing or passage through the Bering Land Bridge, a vast frozen landscape that connected modern-day Russia to Alaska. Scientists believe that this land bridge, called Beringia, only became reliably passable during the last ice age, specifically during a period when sea levels dropped enough to expose a wide corridor of land between Asia and North America. This window of opportunity was thought to have occurred roughly 15,000 to 20,000 years ago. Before that time, the theory held, humans simply couldn't have made the journey. The distances were too vast, the technology too primitive, the climate too hostile. So when paleontologists discovered mastodon bones at a San Diego construction site, showing what appeared to be signs of human modification, dating to 130,000 years in the past, they faced an impossible problem. How could humans have reached North America when they shouldn't have been able to? How could they have survived in an environment that existed during a completely different climate regime? And most troublingly, if humans were truly present 130,000 years ago, why was there virtually no other archaeological evidence of this? Why weren't there more sites, more tools, more skeletal remains? Why had this truth been hidden until now? These questions drove the scientific community into a frenzy of skepticism. And yet, the evidence from the Ceruti Mastodon site, as it came to be known, was genuinely intriguing. The bones bore marks consistent with deliberate percussion. Scientists could see spiral fractures, the kind that occur when bone is broken while it's still fresh, still having moisture and flexibility. These fractures looked nothing like the damage caused by modern construction equipment. They looked nothing like the random breakage you'd see from trampling by large animals or from the weight of soil accumulation over thousands of years. They looked like the result of intentional striking, the kind of damage you'd expect to see if early humans were deliberately breaking open mastodon bones to access the nutritious marrow inside. The team also found stones at the site, large stones that bore signs of use as tools. These weren't flaked stone tools in the traditional sense, not the kind of carefully shaped implements you see in most archaeological sites, but they showed wear patterns, consistent with use as hammers and anvils. The researchers found impact marks, striations, and evidence of repeated striking. When the team conducted experimental archaeology, actually smashing elephant bones, the closest living relative to mastodons, using similar stones, they produced fracture patterns that matched what they found at the Ceruti site. This was compelling evidence. Judy Gradwell, president and CEO of the San Diego Natural History Museum, spoke directly to the significance. She stated that the discovery was rewriting our understanding of when humans reached the New World. The evidence found at the site indicated that some hominin species was living in North America 115,000 years earlier than previously thought. This raises intriguing questions about how these early humans arrived here and who they were. But Gradwell and her team knew they were making an extraordinary claim. And as Carl Sagan famously said, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. The team believed they had that evidence. But they also knew that the scientific community would demand the highest levels of scrutiny. Thomas Desmarais, the principal paleontologist at the San Diego Natural History Museum and one of the lead researchers, acknowledged the magnitude of what they were claiming. He realized that 130,000 years was a really old date. He understood that people would be skeptical. But he was confident that the multiple lines of evidence they had gathered provided just the sort of extraordinary evidence that a revolutionary claim demands. The fossil remains had been discovered during routine paleontological mitigation work at a freeway expansion project. The site had been excavated carefully by museum professionals. The context was documented. The dating was performed by multiple laboratories using different methods, and the results were consistent. The bone fracture patterns had been analyzed by experienced paleontologists. The stone tools showed wear patterns consistent with use. Everything pointed toward human activity at an impossibly ancient time. In 2016, after more than 2 decades of research and analysis, the Ceruti team submitted their findings to Nature, one of the world's most prestigious scientific journals. The paper was peer-reviewed by other experts. It survived the scrutiny. And in April of 2017, the discovery was published in Nature's April 27th issue. The news broke across major media outlets around the world. Headlines proclaimed that the history of human settlement in the Americas might need to be rewritten. Scientists everywhere were forced to grapple with this evidence. Some were intrigued. Many were deeply skeptical. A few were openly hostile to the claims. The criticism was swift and intense. Skeptical archaeologists raised numerous objections. Some questioned whether the bone breakage patterns could have been caused by natural processes. They suggested that trampling by animals might produce similar fractures. They proposed that mud flows or other geological processes could create the arrangement of bones and stones that the team had documented. Others pointed out that the site lacked traditionally recognized stone tools, the kind of flaked and shaped implements that are standard at well-established archaeological sites. If humans were truly present 130,000 years ago with the ability to break open mastodon bones with hammerstones, why wasn't there more extensive evidence of tool production? Where were the carefully crafted spear points, the stone blades, the abundant debitage of stone tool manufacture? Then there was the deeper question of which human or human-like species could have been responsible. Modern humans, Homo sapiens, anatomically like us, only evolved in Africa around 200,000 years ago. Some estimates put the date more recently. Humans didn't leave Africa until at least 70,000 years ago, and even that early dispersal date is controversial among many scientists. So who or what was in San Diego 130,000 years ago? Could it have been Homo erectus, a more primitive hominin that had lived in Africa and Asia, but was thought never to have reached the Americas? Could it have been Neanderthals, who were thriving in Europe at that time, but whose presence in the Americas would be utterly unprecedented? Could it have been Denisovans, mysterious hominin relatives known mainly from DNA found in modern Asian and Pacific Islander populations? The implications branched in multiple directions, each more mind-bending than the last. The Hollands, Stephen and Kathleen, research directors at the Center for American Paleolithic Research, became central figures in the ongoing saga. They had long advocated for the possibility that humans arrived in the Americas much earlier than mainstream science accepted. This position had attracted critics, but the Hollands were undaunted. When they examined the Cerruti specimens in the late 2000s, they reached the same conclusion as Cerruti and his colleagues. The evidence pointed toward human activity. They were willing to stake their reputations on this claim, and they helped push the research forward toward publication. But this decision came with a cost. The couple faced significant professional pushback. Some colleagues distanced themselves from their work. Grant funding became harder to secure. The very idea that humans might have arrived in the Americas tens of thousands of years earlier than established orthodoxy seemed to threaten the entire framework of First Americans' research. Established careers were built on the assumption that humans arrived around 15,000 years ago. Universities had organized their curricula around this timeline. Textbooks had been written. Entire research programs depended on this chronology. The possibility that this was fundamentally wrong was threatening to many people invested in the old paradigm. Yet, skepticism is the foundation of good science. The researchers understood this. They welcomed debate. They encouraged criticism. They wanted other scientists to examine their evidence carefully and offer alternative explanations if they could. What they hoped for was genuine scientific engagement, a serious dialogue about the evidence and its interpretation. What they often encountered instead was a reluctance to engage with the evidence at all. Some leading archaeologists simply declined invitations to visit the site and examine the materials in person. Others made pronouncements about the weakness of the evidence without conducting their own detailed analysis. This struck the Cerruti team as unscientific, as a failure of the archaeological community to live up to its own standards of rigorous investigation. The core dispute hinged on interpretation. The Cerruti team argued that the bone fracture patterns could not be explained by natural processes. They pointed out that carnivores couldn't chew through the middle of a fresh mastodon femur the way the bones had been broken. They noted that trampling alone couldn't produce spiral fractures. They emphasized that their experimental work with elephant bones consistently produced identical fracture patterns when struck with hammerstones. They said that the overall context, the arrangement of bones and stones, the dating evidence, all pointed unambiguously toward human activity. Their critics countered that natural explanations hadn't been definitively ruled out. They suggested that perhaps the geological processes at work during the Pleistocene could have created these patterns through mechanisms not well understood or adequately tested. They emphasized the absence of clear-cut marks on bones, the lack of refined stone tools, the general scarcity of other evidence of human occupation. They questioned whether the dating methods used were truly reliable, whether the uranium series dating technique could be trusted to produce such precise ages for bones that had been buried and exposed to groundwater for such an immense span of time. They asked whether contamination or analytical error might explain the unexpectedly ancient dates. To understand the depth of this controversy, consider what acceptance of the Cerruti evidence would mean. It would mean that humans, or human-like creatures, had somehow managed to reach the Americas during an interglacial period, a warm phase in the Pleistocene, when the ice sheets were much smaller and the land bridge less accessible. It would mean that these humans had persisted for some period of time, long enough to hunt and butcher megafauna. It would mean that humans had achieved a level of cognitive ability and technological sophistication capable of killing mastodons more than 100,000 years earlier than anyone had thought possible. It would mean rewriting textbooks, restructuring academic programs, reconsidering the entire framework of human evolution and dispersal. For a discipline built on the principle of questioning and evidence-based claims, it should have been an exciting prospect. In many ways it was, but it was also threatening in ways that went beyond pure science. Some archaeologists worried that acceptance of such an early date would open the floodgates to fringe theories about pre-Columbian contact with Europe, or other equally speculative ideas. They feared that accepting one controversial claim might undermine the entire edifice of established archaeological knowledge. This fear wasn't entirely without merit, but it also reflected a certain institutional conservatism that has long characterized archaeology as a discipline. The field tends to resist paradigm shifts, even when evidence warrants them. Yet the evidence from Cerruti continued to accumulate. The site showed multiple layers of bone and stone in specific stratigraphic contexts. The bones were embedded in fine-grained sediments that were dated through multiple methods. The spatial arrangement of materials suggested deliberate placement. The stone tools showed consistent wear patterns. The fracture patterns on bones were remarkably consistent with experimental results. Any single piece of evidence might be questioned, but the convergence of multiple independent lines of evidence made the case stronger. This is how archaeology should work. You look for patterns that repeat across different types of evidence. You search for consistency and corroboration. The San Diego Natural History Museum maintained a public display of the Cerruti mastodon discovery. In a 300 square foot exhibition space, visitors could see the actual mastodon bones, the molars, the tusks, and the stones that the research team believed were used as tools. The museum presented the evidence and the interpretations, but also acknowledged the controversy and the ongoing debate within the scientific community. This was honest science communication, presenting what was known while being transparent about areas of uncertainty and disagreement. Years passed. The initial firestorm of controversy didn't subside completely, but it evolved. Some archaeologists remained open-minded about the possibility. Even if they weren't fully convinced by the existing evidence, they suggested that more research was needed, more sites, more evidence. If humans truly occupied North America 130,000 years ago, surely there should be other sites showing similar patterns. The absence of such sites was curious. It suggested either that such sites were incredibly rare and difficult to find, or that the Karuti interpretation was incorrect. This became a key point of contention. Where were all the other ancient human sites? The research team countered that finding archaeological sites is extraordinarily difficult, especially sites that are so ancient. Most such sites would be buried deep beneath younger geological layers. Many might be underwater, inundated by rising sea levels since that time. The coast of California has changed dramatically over 130,000 years. Places that were dry land then might now be underwater, inaccessible to archaeology. Human populations at such an early time were likely small and sparse. They left few traces. Finding one site was remarkable enough. Expecting to find dozens of such sites might be unrealistic, given what we know about the challenges of archaeological discovery and the vagaries of preservation and erosion. But the lack of corroborating evidence remained a significant weakness in the case. This is what most scientists pointed to when explaining their skepticism. It wasn't that the Ceruti evidence was obviously false or fraudulent. It was that it seemed to exist in isolation, unsupported by other discoveries, without the kind of archaeological context that would normally be expected. A single extraordinary claim, even supported by multiple lines of evidence at one site, carries less weight than would be carried by a pattern of multiple sites, showing similar evidence spread across a wide geographical area over a long period of time. The debate raised fascinating questions about the nature of scientific proof and the burden of evidence required for extraordinary claims. How much evidence is enough? When a discovery challenges established understanding, should the threshold of proof be raised? Most scientists believe it should. Extraordinary claims do require extraordinary evidence. But what constitutes extraordinary evidence? Is it the strength of the evidence at a single site? Is it the breadth of corroborating evidence across multiple sites? Is it the theoretical coherence with what we know about human capabilities at different points in the evolutionary timeline? These are ultimately questions that don't have clean answers. They depend on the judgment of experts, on professional experience and intuition, on careful weighing of competing considerations. And reasonable experts can disagree. Some paleontologists and archaeologists looked at the Karuti evidence and saw compelling proof of ancient human presence. Others looked at the same evidence and saw an interesting anomaly that might have a non-human explanation. Both positions were scientifically defensible. Both were based on careful analysis of available evidence. The Karuti mastodon site was compared by some to other great controversies in the history of science. The comparison was drawn to the story of J. Harlan Bretz and the channeled scablands of Washington state. Bretz proposed in the 1920s that massive catastrophic floods had carved the landscape of the Pacific Northwest. His theory was rejected by the geological establishment for decades. He faced skepticism, criticism, and professional isolation. But eventually, as evidence accumulated and the geological community's understanding evolved, Bretz was vindicated. His theory of catastrophic flooding became accepted. The parallel to the Karuti controversy was imperfect but instructive. Sometimes revolutionary claims do overturn established orthodoxy. Sometimes the skeptics are proven wrong, but sometimes they're proven right. The history of science includes both triumphant vindications and discredited theories that seemed convincing at the time. What we can say with certainty is that the Karuti mastodon discovery represents a profound challenge to established understanding. Whether that challenge ultimately leads to a paradigm shift in our understanding of when humans reached the Americas remains to be seen. The discovery raised the profound question that all science must grapple with. How do we know what we know? How certain can we ever be about the why required for revolutionary claims? These aren't just academic questions. They touch on fundamental aspects of how humans understand their own history and our place in the world. Thomas Desmarais and his team at the San Diego Natural History Museum continued their work. They continued to study the Ceruti materials. They welcomed genuine scientific engagement with their findings. They hoped that future discoveries might shed light on the question of early human presence in North America. They believed that the Ceruti site pointed toward a deeper truth about human history, that humans had been more mobile, more capable, and more successful at adapting to diverse environments than mainstream science had previously credited. The fossil itself told a powerful story. Here was a mastodon, a massive creature weighing many tons with tusk and bone and teeth. This creature had lived and died somewhere in Southern California during an epoch when the climate was different, when the landscape was populated by creatures now extinct. And somewhere in that past, another creature, a human or human-like being, had encountered this mastodon. What had happened between these two species? Had the human hunted the mastodon, deliberately killing it for food? Had the human scavenged the carcass after the mastodon died of natural causes? Had the human engaged in some ritual behavior with the bones? We don't know. The bones themselves can't tell us that story. They only tell us that modification occurred, that percussion occurred, that the bones were deliberately broken and handled. This mystery is part of what makes the discovery so compelling. It represents a window, however narrow and difficult to interpret, into a vanished world. A world where humans and mastodons coexisted, where humans demonstrated the cognitive ability to recognize opportunity and the technological skill to exploit it. A world completely different from the one we know, yet connected to it across a vast span of geological time. The San Diego excavation changed the conversation about early human presence in the Americas. Even scientists, who remained skeptical about the Cerruti interpretation, had to grapple with new possibilities. If the mastodon bones were truly modified by human hands, then the timeline had to be rewritten. If humans weren't capable of reaching the Americas 130,000 years ago, then how do we explain the evidence? The presence of anomalies, even controversial ones, is how science advances. Anomalies force us to reconsider our assumptions, to look more carefully at evidence, to ask harder questions about the boundaries of human capability and the patterns of human dispersal. The research published in Nature spawned hundreds of subsequent papers, debates, conferences sessions, and scholarly discussions. Some papers defended the Cerruti interpretation. Others offered alternative explanations for the evidence. Still others called for more research, more sites, more data before any firm conclusions could be drawn. This is healthy scientific discourse. Ideas are proposed, evidence is examined, alternatives are considered, and gradually, through this collective process, understanding advances. What we can conclude is that in 1992, construction workers widening a highway in San Diego genuinely did stumble upon something remarkable. Whether that something represents evidence of humans in North America 130,000 years ago, or represents something else, entirely remains an open question. But the question itself is profound. It touches on deep truths about human history, about the capabilities of our ancestors, about how we came to inhabit this planet. The Cerruti Mastodon site reminds us that the past holds secrets we're still discovering, mysteries we're still unraveling, truths that challenge our understanding. And sometimes a pile of broken bones along a highway can force us to reconsider everything we thought we knew about who we are and where we came from.